Thank you. Thanks very much. With the good suggestion, if you would please join me and rise and as we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Thank you. And thanks for being here on this beautiful Saturday morning. You know, it's, you look at the red, white, and blue, the stars and stripes, and it just sends a positive chill down your spine. I can tell you that still, every time you walk into the Capitol, you see the dome, you walk onto the floor of the House of Representatives, it just sends that awe-inspiring chill down your spine. And I want to thank you for allowing me to be your representative and represent Utah to Washington, not Washington to Utah, represent Utah to Washington in those fights that are so big and so weighty. You know, I can tell you that I tend to thrive in the heat of the moment. It's partly why I was a place kicker. I kind of like being right there with everything on the line. I enjoy that. I thrive on that. But I feel the weight day in and day out there in the United States Congress and all the issues that face there before us. I got to tell you, it's very humbling. You get down on your knees and you pray more than you ever have in your life, because the issues that you're dealing with are so big and so weighty and so important to our future. And then as you break it down and you get into these committees and subcommittee meetings, you start to recognize that very few people actually pay attention to any given issue. You know, we'll have a big issue like healthcare and everybody will kind of weigh in. But then you take all the other issues that have impact upon our daily lives, and you very quickly realize that there may be 4 or 5 people on each side of the aisle that will actually have the time or the fortitude to weigh in on a particular issue. And I think it's a good segue for me to say that no matter what party you're involved with, we need good people involved who will put their country first, who will do the right thing. And I recognize there are different perspectives in how we achieve that. And I can get you all whipped up on some certain things that I'm sure would infuriate almost everybody. But I got to tell you, there are good people out there. And as Dave was talking about, we have to get good people involved in every aspect, in every corner. You hear that a lot from a lot of different people. I'm not saying I'm here to endorse them. I'm just here to say some good things about a guy on the other side of the aisle, a Democrat. A little reverberation there. There's a guy named Mike Quigley. Now, Mike Quigley replaced Rahm Emanuel. And I tell you, when he came in to replace Rahm Emanuel, I thought, okay, this is a guy that I'm going to just butt heads with on every step of the way, because I'm on two of the 3 committees I'm on. He's on the other side of the aisle. And I thought, wow, all right, this is going to be interesting. He's a freshman. He came in after I did because he replaced Rahm Emanuel in a special election. So we were in our first meeting. We were talking about the countrywide loans. See, the Republican side of the aisle, we were trying to issue a subpoena for these called Friends of Angelo program. And we were trying to issue a subpoena because essentially they were trying to influence members of Congress and other people in the administration, we thought, inappropriately. So we want to see this list of loans that were given out. These are things where they would be no interest, no points. They would basically huge favoritism because they were people of influence. Well, you're not allowed to do that as a member of Congress, so we want to see the list and who actually did do it. Well, the Democrats had blocked this. They said, no, absolutely, we're not going to do that. Until Mike Quigley said, you know what? I'm going to support you in this. And whether that list includes Republicans or Democrats, we got to look at that list. That's our job and role and responsibility in the United States Congress. And we about fell off our chair. Said, oh my goodness, you're going to support us in that? I was in another committee in Judiciary. And we were talking about a long-standing program that was up for reauthorization. And Chairman Conyers was making a point, and a guy named Nadler, who's out of New York, he's an interesting person to have a dialogue with. Anyway, Mr. Nadler was making this argument that we really didn't need to look back upon history. And I basically raised my hand and said, well, with all due respect, I too was elected. I think history is a good indicator of where we're going. I want to understand why the Congress decided to do and not do certain things. And I was basically making the argument that we should have had a legislative hearing on this bill. See, the majority had just brought up this bill, they brought it up without a hearing, which I thought was wrong. And much to my surprise, all of a sudden, out of the blue, there's Mr. Quigley. I'd like to concur with the gentleman from Utah. I too am a freshman, and he basically reiterated the same thing. I guess what my point is not to hear to sing the praises and endorse Quigley. It's the idea and the notion that we have to get good people involved in every aspect at every level of our government. And the story of my life, and I think a lot of your lives, is the fact that so few people raise their hands. So few people actually will raise their hands and make the effort. But those that do make the world a difference. You know, I like to tell this story, and I promise I'll be brief about it, but growing up, I played soccer year-round, and I remember the vice principal of my school came to me when I was a junior, and a bunch of other guys on the soccer team, and he said, hey, we need somebody to come try out for our team. I know we're terrible, but we need somebody to be a place kicker on our football team. Well, I was the only one that tried out, so I made it. It changed my life. I ended up getting a scholarship. I'd like to say an athletic scholarship, but I was a place kicker. I wasn't really a football player, you know, so I can't really call it an athletic scholarship, but I get a scholarship to BYU. It changed my life. Totally changed my life. And I can go through example after example after example of people who, at least in my life and other people's lives, where so few people raised their hands, but those that did made the world a difference. You obviously care about your country, you care about the state, you care about our future, you care about our troops. And so I cannot thank you enough for stepping forward and saying, yeah, I want to participate. And part of what you're going to learn here today is how to do that in a tactful way without bulldozing people over, but at the same time engaging in your own neighborhoods. At the end of the day, it is still about precinct by precinct, neighborhood by neighborhood, city by city, county by county, state by state. I mean, it builds like that. I'm convinced one of the reasons I was able to come in and be successful as a candidate for the United States Congress wasn't because I had big name ID. You can't even pronounce Chaffetz, let alone spell it. I didn't have big dollars, right? I was outspent by $600,000, and that's the normal equation, right? Big dollars, big name ID, big victory. Doesn't work like that. Doesn't always work like that. If that goes unchallenged, if that goes just left to its own device, yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. But I think the more powerful formula is policy and principle, followed by good old-fashioned shoe leather hard work. And if you're committed to principle, if you can talk to people about why it is we're doing something, not necessarily get into the minutia of each individual policy, but raise it up a little bit. You know, in my own campaign, I talked about, look, there are four core things that we need to do to return to prosperity. Fiscal discipline, limited government, accountability, and a strong national defense. Those are supposed to be the pillars of the Republican Party. And I for one, was frustrated. Remember, I was the one that stood up and said, Republicans had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and quite frankly, they blew it. And the reason they blew it wasn't because our country became suddenly more liberal, it's because our country abandoned those principles. The people that were elected to institute and implement those very conservative principles abandoned those principles. That's why we were failing, that's why we were struggling, and that's why the country failed. So I guess my point is to garner that passion that you have for your country,